Welcome to the latest edition of Dynamic Political Centrism, hosted by Alan Steinberg, produced by Dr. Yonatan Yoni Yaris.
Our guest, Steve Sweeney, former New Jersey State Senate President and one of the candidates for governor for the Democratic Party.
Good evening and welcome. I am Alan Steinberg. I am the voice of Dynamic Political Centrism. Our podcast has really made inroads into the New Jersey political scene. But tonight we have a very special guest. We have a figure of historic dimensions, and I say that without any hyperbole whatsoever. In my view, and I have experience with this, Steve Sweeney was the greatest and always will be the greatest president in the history of the New Jersey Senate. Now, that's a tough job because he had to forge consensus between both political parties. In addition to that, the senators each have a right of senatorial courtesy where they can block any appointments, and they use it often to block legislation. And he also had a lot of urgent matters on hand involving the state budget, involving state criminal matters. And he had a reputation throughout of absolutely flawless integrity. So it's very rare where I have a political figure that I have such admiration for, but we'll get into all the reasons in a minute. But before I introduce him, this is a historic day in New Jersey politics. In my view, in terms of the Republican Party, and I don't say this with any rancor, as you know, I was a Republican before Donald Trump came on the scene. And with Donald Trump, the Republican Party left me. And as such, I've had no connection whatsoever except to interview people and have them on my various shows. But tonight, the Republican Party, in terms of gubernatorial election 2025, is finished because today's collapse of the stock market and today's introduction by Donald Trump of the most idiotic measure I have ever seen in terms of economic measures in the history of New Jersey, I should say, the tariffs, they just crushed the stock market. It will be impossible for a Republican, in my view, to be elected to the governorship of New Jersey because whoever that candidate is, for example, it may be Jack Ciattarelli. He's an outstanding man. He would make a good governor, but he will be branded with Donald Trump. And the name Donald Trump is one that will go down in infamy after today. And the same, too, is true with John Bramnick, who is also an outstanding individual. So the winner of the Democratic primary is going to be the next governor. And Steve Sweeney is a key. I would introduce him with the following. Metaphors, Steve, so I hope you'll be patient with me. He reminds me, in terms of his leadership style, Vince Lombardi, who was my all-time favorite football coach. And when Vince Lombardi died, hopefully Steve has a lot of years left, but Willie Davis, who was a great defensive lineman for the Packers, he said at that time, he said Vince Lombardi was as great of a man as he was a football coach, and he was all the man at both. That's how I would introduce Steve Sweeney tonight. He's an outstanding man. He is an outstanding political leader. And if he is elected governor, he will be both an outstanding man as an example to the children and youth of our state, and he would be an outstanding leader of our state. So, Steve, with no further ado, welcome to the Dynamic Political Centrism podcast. We're honored that you're here.
Alan, and I am absolutely thrilled to be here. And over my shoulder is a photo and some speech. Barty.
Oh my!
I'm a huge. He's why I'm a Green Bay Packer fan. He was the greatest coach ever, and he's in New Jersey. You know, he's New Jersey. That's where he was born in Jersey.
Steve, I can't believe this coincidence. I got another coincidence coming up, but that is an incredible coincidence. I mean, the 5 times, and in 1960, were you born yet in 1960? You're a lot younger than I am. I'm 75. You're still a relative youth.
I was born in 50. I was born in 59, and I started watching football in 1964.
Well,
and the team of the 60s were.
Yes, but you missed one of the most exciting moments in Philadelphia football history. I presume now you root for the Eagles. I was a Steeler fan, but you're not?
I'm a Green Bay Packer fan. My
Well,
father
that
said when
you
you,
show character.
Alan, my father said, when you pick a team, you stick with the team. Loyalty is very important, and I've always been a loyal person.
Well, you are, except I have conflicting loyalties. I grew up in Pittsburgh with the frustration of the Steelers before their great years. So I delighted when they finally won a title. But my son, with whom I'm very close, is a huge Philadelphia Eagles fan. And when he was a kid, I would watch Eagles fans, green just like the Green Bay Packers. But perhaps one of the greatest NFL championship games I saw was in 1960 at the old Franklin Field when the Eagles had Chuck Bednarik, Concrete Charlie, at middle linebacker. They beat the Packers in the very last second because Concrete Charlie tackled Jimmy Taylor. I won't use the language that he used. It was rather colorful. He said he tackled Jimmy Taylor, and he said, "You can get up now. The blankety blank game is over."
Yeah.
And that's a game with your characters an ironworker. You know, it's like ironworker Steve Sweeney, Concrete Charlie Bednarik. I have another guy I can identify you with now, Concrete Charlie Bednarik. So
Oh,
the
he was
fact that
tough.
we connected on the Packers is unbelievable.
Yeah.
Well, that's fortunate. But, I have another connection with you, which I think speaks very well of your political skills. I grew up in Pittsburgh. I was in the Navy JAG Corps. And when I went into the practice of law, I got a job with a person who became a very big man in my life, Marty Herman, who was an outstanding member of the state assembly. And when you talk about chairs of the Judiciary Committee, he was number one. And I learned a lot from him, both about the practice of law, but also about politics. And I always felt one way about the third district. It was a very diverse district. You had people of all ethnic groups. You also had different issues that would come up in that district. And you had a diversity, in my view, of people who had moved out of Philadelphia to South Jersey. And you also had different racial groups. So I thought if a person could do what you did in terms of getting overall support in that third legislative district and molding consensus on behalf of a program, that was quite an accomplishment. So I think there's a lot of great things in your background, but I think the third district is one of them, at least in my view.
Yeah, Alan, the third district, I used to have to tell my colleagues in the Senate, everyone thinks Newark or Camden were the poorest districts in the state. The poorest district in the state of New Jersey is the third legislative district. And we have rural poverty. People don't really see us. And the challenges in that district are extreme, from the lack of transportation and employment. And again, very diverse, very difficult district. Probably one of the most conservative ones where Democrats held office. As you know, Marty's running mate, Ray Zane, was pretty tough.
Well, you defeated him.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I was able to defeat him. But the district itself is, again, very suburban, rural, farming, most active farming district in the state. Cumberland County is the poorest county in the state of New Jersey, and Salem's the second poorest. So, just a lot of work to be done to try to move the ball. And we did some good stuff down there.
You delivered a lot for that district. Marty did too. But
Yeah.
the incredible thing was that it always struck me, you must have put a lot of miles on your car because I think that was the biggest state district and area in the state. I'm positive it was.
Yeah. Alan, it was from one end of the district to the other end was almost an hour. The district that I first served in had 38 towns, you know what I mean? And, a lot of
Holy
small
cow.
towns.
That's unbelievable. I remember when I was working for Marty, we represented some people who bought the radio station down there. And and I realized how much, and I say this in a very good way, how radio and the communications like that mattered to the people of the third district. They were good people. They were basically honest people who stood for traditional values. So I'm sure that in terms of representing that district, you're known as a man of outstanding character, and that was in line with your character and also with your politics. So, that speaks well of you.
Alan, thank you. And parts of the parts of the third district still don't have cable TV.
I'm not surprised, but that's really I don't want to use the word shocking, but that shows how impoverished a lot of the district is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I remember Marty was often dealing with farm issues down there, like farmland assessment, things like that. And so, but it also had people like yourself who had come from Pennsauken, the more or less urban, Camden County. And so it was a real mixture for you. But I want to talk about Pennsauken for a minute because that's another connection you and I have from Camden County.
Yeah.
I lived in Camden County for a while, but I had a deeper connection than that. In the 1950s, my uncle became the head of the commissary store at Fort Dix. And he moved from Pittsburgh. He moved into Camden County at the time. It's amazing. Camden City, and this is something Jim Florio really touched my heart with. When I grew very close to Jim Florio as a result of my serving at Region 2 EPA. And when I had environmental issues, I'd call him in, and it was like he was like an encyclopedia on the environment. He really was. And one day he was a very soulful individual, which people didn't know. They just thought of him as a tough guy, but he had a very deep soul. And one day he said to me, I told him how great when I would visit my aunt and uncle and my cousins, they lived in what was called Delaware Township then. It later became Cherry Hill. But most of the Jewish community, of which my heritage is very deep, lived in Camden City. Camden City was a great place to live at one time. It was right next to Pennsauken, where you grew up. And the Parkside area of Camden was a very storied area. I believe, like, for example, Lou Katz lived in Parkside. I think Lee Laskin lived in Parkside. It was a beautiful urban neighborhood. However, as a result of drug problems, as a result of racial conflict, the city of Camden was very badly affected. And it also struck you. I know you worked with, and I say this in a positive way, you worked with George Norcross in really trying to rehabilitate Camden City. And that's something you didn't have to do. You're representing Gloucester County, but you were true to your heritage on that. And I hope someday, I know you have a vision for Camden City. I hope it comes to pass.
Thanks, Al. It's funny. My father grew up in Camden. I think if you're in South Jersey, there's a real connection for everyone with Camden. My father grew up there, grew up on Linden Street near Northgate Apartments. In fact, I think his house is still standing. But Camden was the jewel of South Jersey at one time, as you know.
It sure was.
And it just fell. Yeah, and listen, there was the Parkside section where a large Jewish community resided. There was the Polish section, you know what I mean? Like, it was a big town where, it had such great diversity in it. And we want to bring that back. And I think we are starting to bring it back by ensuring that there's opportunities for people to get employment. And hopefully we get them to move back into the city because we're making it safer and we made the schools better. Because people want to live where they can get their kids educated and where they feel safe. And, like, the frustration right now is as soon as someone gets a good job, they leave Camden, they move somewhere else. We want people to stay in Camden and help, repopulate and flourish.
You have laid the foundation for a revival of Camden. I realize there's one big problem there, which is not the fault of anybody. It's a sign of urban decline. There will have to be, the Camden for many years is classified as a food desert, and it'll be a challenge to get, grocery stores and whatever. But I think what you've done thus far with working with the New Jersey EDA, Florio was thrilled with what had happened. He said, Alan, as far as I'm concerned, I'm Jim Florio. I grew up in Brooklyn, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm still Jim Florio from the city of Camden. And people don't understand that. They just think of Camden as a slum. But you, George Norcross, and Florio really established a vision for Camden. And hopefully, please God, that will come true in our lifetimes. I'd love to see it.
Well, Alan, my father, my father and George's father were very close friends.
Yes, I know
And,
that.
there was four sons on their family, four sons in my family. And when we opened up the Cooper Medical School, the Rowan, in Camden, the Cooper Medical,
Right.
Rowan's Medical, the Cooper and Rowan, my father said to me, he says, Jim Florio had appointed me and George's father to try to bring a medical school to Camden. He says, and he said to me, he says, I'm so proud of you. You fulfilled one of our dreams. And, it's about bringing that community back and really believing and wanting and hoping for people to have a better life, because we all do better when Camden does better. I can tell you that right now.
I absolutely feel the same way. I love the city of Camden, and I remember the glory days. I remember when there were theaters downtown. I remember when there were good restaurants to eat at. I remember when Camden was such a hub of political activities of both parties. And hopefully, I'm 75 now, but in my lifetime, I want to see Jim Florio never lived to see it. I hope I live to see it in memory of Jim Florio to a large extent, in memory of people like your father and George's father, who really, they were involved in all aspects of life, raising their families. But the rebirth of Camden would be a great tribute to your political career, to George and everyone else. And I hope it happens in our lifetime. That would be delightful. But I want to move on from there because you have some unique attributes. And I mean that. One of them is you didn't have the opportunity to get a college degree. Yet when I heard you in the debates, you look like a guy who had graduated Harvard, and a lot of these debaters were pathetic. What you have is, well, I'll use a Yiddish word if I can be pardoned for that. There's a Yiddish word called sechel. It's a word meaning not just common sense, but street smarts, ability to cut through all the problems. And your debate with the other Democratic candidates was a real tribute to your political acumen and also to the embrace you could get around issues. So I think that what you have shown in your career is just remarkable. And I think that when people hear you in the course of this campaign, you will strike them as a person who really grasps the essentials of life. But speaking of essentials, the biggest essential in the life of Steve Sweeney, I feel, is your daughter Lauren. And I want you to talk about that because in the course of being an unsurpassed father, and I know I'm a father myself, I know, and a grandfather, I know what it means. You really have grasped the essence of life and how, in spite of all the challenges of your situation, you have had real joy. So I'd like you to comment on Lauren and explain it to our listeners.
Well, Alan, uh, I'm very fortunate to have a son who's 4 years older. And I was an iron worker working on buildings and construction, climbing around steel buildings, and probably wasn't the best father at that time. But Lauren came along and helped me find my purpose in life. And Lauren was born 2 pounds, 75 days in a neonatal unit. That's where New Jersey's paid family leave law was actually born, not knowing that I would get to be where I'm at. But Lauren opened up my eyes to life. And we all take things for granted because things happen automatically. With Lauren, we taught her how to crawl. We taught her how to sit up. We taught her how to drink out of a straw. You know what I mean? She had to learn everything. And it opened my eyes to basically when Lauren was born, I was born into a different world with her. Like a parallel universe, that not realizing the struggles that people go through because I was gifted. Everything worked out properly when I was a young man. So Lauren helped me find my purpose, and I found out what it is to fight for people with disabilities. And I'm telling you, Alan, if you met my daughter, you would be so impressed in how intelligent, her personality, how sweet she is. And she cares about people. She loves people. It's amazing what you can see when you look beyond the disability. When you look at Lauren, she has Down syndrome. But if people can get beyond seeing that disability, you have one amazing, like my daughter's one amazing young lady that wants the life like everyone else wants. She works at a daycare center. She comes home, or when I come home, because I'm running for governor, she'll tell me about her day that RJ cursed and she had to put him in timeout. And she gives you the blow by blow for the day. Then she'll make me FaceTime her boyfriend, which I can tell you right now I'm not crazy about.
I was going
But
to say, if he runs afoul of you, you're going to kill him.
listen, he does anything to upset my daughter, Alan. But it's like I said, she wants to live a full life. She's living the fullest life she can. So her birth just made me a person that I didn't think I could be. One thing I knew, I was always a fighter. I always fought. My father said to me one time, I'm the most stubborn person he ever met in his life. Because if I believed in something, I wasn't going to stop until I could get it done. As an iron worker, I went on a job as a young iron worker, and there was 40-foot columns. And the foreman said, hey, you get the work's up there. And I said, well, where's the ladders? He said, there's no ladders here. I said, well, how am I going to get up there? He says, asses and elbows. Like, remember when you saw the guys
Oh,
with
man.
the and I said to the guy, this stuck with me my whole life, Alan. I said to the guy, well, I can't do that. He said, well, if you can't do it, you can't stay. The only people that are going to be here are the ones that can. You can't do it, go back to the union hall. So guess what? I'm 250 pounds. I bench press 450 pounds. I look like a refrigerator with little arms. I climbed up that column, right? And he said, hey, it's lunchtime. I said, no, I'm good. I'm going to stay up here. But I figured it out. I figured it out real quick. But I believe there's, if like what that foreman taught me, if you can't do it, you can't stay. There is nothing that you can't do. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's shorter. But if you decide to get something done, you're going to get it done.
But you know what is so moving about your experience is that you took it beyond your immediate family. You became an advocate for special needs children of all races, colors, and creeds. You dove deeply into the problems. The family leave bill that you championed has enabled, I'd say, thousands of special needs children in New Jersey to live a more livable life, a life that offers them more opportunity. That alone could be your legacy. You have a lot more legacy than that. But that is a legacy that not only you, but your posterity, everybody can be proud of. And most politicians I know stay away from legacies. They think there's no real payoff in that. They want to go to political leaders and people like that to get votes. But I think that when people look at Steve Sweeney, they will say he established a political legacy with his heart. And because of his heart, thousands of New Jersey children have benefited. And your daughter, Lauren, should live a long, happy, complete life and continue to bring joy into your life and continue to bring pride. And I think that I have a sense that that's your inspiration for everything you do with special needs children. You are to be congratulated for that.
Well, Alan, when I'm around special needs people, it just brings a smile to my face because they're honest. There's nothing but love, trust, caring, and I just love watching people with disabilities actually exceed what people think they can do. Because people with disabilities, we put limits on them which aggravates me. People get limits on what they can do rather than giving them the opportunity to be the most that they want to be. And I'm telling you, my daughter Lauren, she keeps telling me she's going to get married, and I'm like, not to this boy. You know what I mean? It's like, no way.
It's like I have a granddaughter, 10, and I keep telling my son and my daughter-in-law that I'm a nervous wreck because as far as I'm concerned, nobody will be good enough for her, and I may do something crazy, But that's fatherly love, that's grandfatherly love, and what you've done for Lauren is an inspiration not only to people who are in the political world, but to fathers everywhere. So, as one father and grandfather, I salute Steve Sweeney for that, and I know how he feels in terms of protecting what is most precious in his life, and that is something that not only you can be proud of, but we all can be proud of. And I think that also, I have a sense that you've always been known as a person of empathy, and as such, I think that what you did is you turned an experience that maybe not everyone was up for, but you built the empathy of your life, and you made it an inspiration for your leadership. But that's not the only area of leadership. You've led the state in terms of the issue that seems to be central in this campaign, and that's the issue of affordability. I want to talk to you about that because I just got a book. I don't know if this will show up on TV. Hold on, let's see what I can. I drive my producer crazy with this. This is a book. It doesn't show up on TV, so I'll read you the title. It's a book that just came out that's written by Ezra Klein and Derek Thompson. It's called Abundance. Has some interesting conclusions. Number one, they focus on affordability, but in their view, affordability is more than just tax affordability. It's housing affordability, because housing has become, really, in my view, the biggest expense that someone living in New Jersey has to face. And also, it makes this point. In a lot of the red states, and I'm not a red state person, okay, but in a lot of the red states, when they need more housing, when they need more highways, whatever they need, they just go out and build it. But in the blue states, there's a lot of obstructions in terms of permits and all the rest. You're a person who has worked at the county level. You were the freeholder director in Gloucester County, which I also think speaks very well of you, because in a sense, being a freeholder director gave you executive experience too, because you were leading a freeholder board. How do you feel in terms of the various facets of affordability? I'd like to focus first on housing, because I believe, do you still live in Turnersville? I thought that's where you live.
I'm in West Stafford Township.
I know West Stafford. That's where Marty lived.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of good people there. Great community. Alan, this is an area that we all should be really concerned about. You know, young people start accruing wealth when they buy a home. You know that. That's when you
right.
start accruing. And price now in New Jersey is more than $500,000, which is delaying young couples from starting the process of accruing wealth. Like, my first house that I bought was a townhome. Some people would say affordable housing. You know what I'm saying? Like, because
it has a connotation that maybe it isn't as good as real housing, but affordable housing is often the first stop, and it's also where you get your first equity. I'm sorry, I just wanted to make a note of that.
Yeah, Alan. And for me, I'm a young ironworker. My wife was a hairstylist, right? So, that's the house I could afford to start, paying mortgage payments on. Now, once you start accruing, once that gains value and wealth, then it's the starter to get you up to the next step a lot of times. So we have to build more housing in New Jersey to bring the cost of housing down. We're short probably 200,000 housing units. And, the stuff about affordable housing, it's more about, I hate to say race, but affordable housing is, poverty doesn't have a color. Poverty is black, brown, white, you know what I mean? Poor is poor. But if we don't build more housing, we can't bring the cost of housing down. Young people won't be able to accrue and start growing that wealth, and we're delaying the success of our young people. That opportunity was there for me. I'm 65 now. I'm thinking, the young people in their 20s and early 30s, they can't even think about buying a house. So we have to do something immediately to start changing the direction of this.
Well, what would you do? I mean, this is exactly that's why I'm happy to have you here tonight, because that focus on affordable housing, you've made the point, number one, that too often it is a racial slur term. I got to get affordable housing, but that's beneath me because I don't want to be with people of color. And the other thing is, you made the point that a person's real wealth in New Jersey and other places is that first home and how the equity builds up. What would you do in terms of making, number one, the affordable housing more affordable, so to speak? But number two, in terms of using the laws in a very good way, the laws of zoning and permits to speed up the process.
Well, first, Alan, I would look at the permitting process that we have when it comes to housing, the building process, because there are some things that are very important and are necessary, and then there's things that maybe aren't as necessary, but just add cost, to the house itself, which is the consumer. So the permitting process to make sure we protect the environment, make sure people build safe homes, but all that permitting cost goes onto the bottom line of the house. You know that. It's not like
Absolutely.
it's not just materials, it's those legal costs all go with it. That's number one. And number two, Mount Laurel was decided by the Supreme Court in 1971, and we still have towns fighting and suing, to block housing. And we knew what the Mount Laurel decision was. The Mount Laurel decision was, exclusionary zoning to keep people out. Well, one of the other big problems we have in New Jersey, we have one of the most segregated school systems in the nation. We are the first majority minority district, state in the country. We will be if we're not already there. But we're the most segregated when it comes to housing. And we're not going to get better until we figure out the housing piece. So we got to push and we got to use all the powers of the administration, all the powers the governor has to stop the BS lawsuits and start working with communities to build housing. Because again, it's only driving up the costs and slowing down the progress. What I can't understand, Alan, and you're an attorney, so I'm glad to ask you a question. The Supreme Court ruled in 1971 on housing. How can they still be fighting it 50 some years later?
In my view, that is an example of the type of litigation that never ends. I'm not trying to avoid your question, but everyone has agendas when it comes to quote unquote affordable housing. The builder's remedy is one, although in a sense, I think the builder's remedy did some good in terms of getting some housing built. And basically, it also gave people an authority who were being racially blocked. But again, the real reason I feel that litigation drags on is that some people can afford it and others can't. And the people who can afford it, like builders and people who are looking to establish what they used to call McMansions, they can litigate forever. And you put your finger on it. A lot of times the motive is race. Let's get real. The motive is race, and it's an ugly tone. I remember the beginning of Mount Laurel and how, you had such demonstrations against it. And here it was, as you said, it was an opportunity to really build a more integrated society. But people don't want that, unfortunately. So if they have the money for attorneys and they have the wherewithal to engage in a long litigation fight, they're going to do it. I mean, it doesn't speak well of us. But that at least is my perception. You may have a different perception than I have.
No, Alan, I got to tell you, I took the opportunity to speak to an attorney that understands this. You know what I'm saying? And I appreciate that answer. I know it's your show. I'm not supposed to be asking you questions.
No, on my show, anyone can ask any questions, except my private life, but that's another story.
I got you.
Go ahead. I'm listening. When
No,
you said you asked another attorney that question.
no. I said I took the opportunity to ask you, an attorney, the question.
Well, why shouldn't you ask me? I mean, I can't host a show if I'm going to be evasive and expect leaders in our community like you to just be the subject of all the controversy. And plus that, I had a long political career. I was Region 2 EPA administrator. I dealt with controversy all the time. And during the Trump years, I've become persona non grata with a lot of people because of my opposition to him. So we're accountable. But you have never ducked accountability. That is what distinguishes you. And I'm going to get on to a person on that because you called to accountability Mikey Sherrill, who has made a career in this campaign of avoiding accountability. And I want you to address that because I think that it was so admirable when you brought up the fact that she had taken $31,000 from the PAC groups of Elon Musk, then said, "Well, I used it, so I don't have it to pay back." That was the phoniest answer I could have heard, except for the guy who bought the first Edsel. But it was such a phony answer. And then all of a sudden, when she realized that politically this was going to hurt her, she found that money right away. So you have called her to account on that. But I'd like you to talk on some of the other aspects where you have called her to account, rightfully so, because we want our next governor to have integrity, to not be evasive. And so go ahead. I want to hear.
Well, Alan, the answer that she gave about not having the money to, I already spent it.
Right.
Number one, that tells you she's not ready for this job. She really isn't when you say 100%. Things like that. And, the amazing thing is we called her out on it. So she returns the money and then she has the gall to try to fundraise saying, "Help me stop Elon Musk." Well, you didn't do anything to stop Elon Musk. In fact, you helped him. You enabled him. Right? So
100%.
So making that statement really, well, that's Washington. Again, that's the way they act in Washington. And then there's an organization, the ABC, which is a predominantly non-union organization, that her super PAC took $25,000 from. Now, she knows who they are, and they took the money anyway. You know what I mean, Alan? So, listen, I just put something out today, a piece. Mikey's doing all this, "I'm standing up to Donald Trump." Really? Well, you were one of 8 Congress people that voted on a bill that allowed Donald Trump, the Department of Defense, to spend their money at Donald Trump properties. So 8 U.S. Congress people voted. All the Democrats voted against, but 8. She was one of 8 that voted to let Donald Trump make money off the military. That's not fighting Donald Trump. That's helping Donald Trump be richer.
That's helping Donald Trump grift. Let's get real. It's helping him grift.
Well, but see, you don't say you're fighting someone when you're enabling them.
100%.
And that's what she's done in both of these cases. But the thing that really caught my eye was when I saw her trying to fundraise, "Help me stop Elon Musk." What do you think people would have thought if they knew that she helped Elon Musk? You know what I'm saying?
I certainly do, because he has created a disgraceful atmosphere throughout the country, and I don't think she gives a hoot about valued government career people who have made our government work every day, and then she's saying, "Well, I don't have the money to give to charity or to pay him back." That was as phony as a Confederate $3 bill. And but you had the courage to stand up for that, and also I think that it spoke well of your sense of ethics as to what you want from people in government, people who would serve in your administration. And I also feel this. I don't think that she really has experience with New Jersey issues. You have experienced every single issue New Jersey has. You've anything that was in, if you've served as a leader in a state Senate or state assembly, you deal with a plethora of issues. She's dealt with federal issues, but not state issues. And I don't think that you can just go into state government and claim you have such insight when you've never really dealt with any state issues and you are not prepared or experienced enough to deal with all the niceties of state politics. That's at least my view.
Well, Alan, when we did our first debate, and her opening statement was, I'm going to help fix New Jersey by getting more federal money. And I don't know if you remember my reaction. I said, you're going to get more federal money from this guy, this administration? And the point is, but Congress people have a tendency to do that. Their speeches it's different. Congress is, first off, they print money. They can run a deficit. We can't. We have to balance the budget. We don't have, we just can't tell the mint to work an extra weekend so that we can have more money. So, number one, you have to understand state government. It's not close to federal government. Well, you'll have Congress people say, I'm going to introduce a bill that never goes anywhere, right? Because that's all you ever hear. I'm going to put a bill in, but it doesn't get passed, just gathers dust. I'm going to get more federal money. Well, that's not how you run government. You have to actually look at what's going on and just head on deal with issues. I got great scars all over my body for saving the pension fund from going bankruptcy. You're right.
Oh, I remember that.
Right. The pension fund was going to go bankrupt, Alan. And, people don't want to believe it, but the numbers don't lie. People lie at times, numbers don't. And, so I could have sat back and let it go bankrupt, but leaders don't do those things. Leaders have to do the job they were elected to do. You don't get a pass. So at great political cost to me, we saved the pension fund from going bankrupt. 20 years prior to me being Senate president, the state of New Jersey put $3 billion in the pension fund. From 2011 to today, we've put $50 billion in the pension fund. And when people say, well, you forced the pension change, I said, look, pensions go bankrupt. Forget COLAs. They cut into the pension. But see, Alan, I do this for a living, so I understand it. And sometimes people don't like the truth. Well, my reputation in Trenton was I didn't lie to you. I gave you a straight up answer. And a lot of times people will ask you a question and you can tell by the question where they want you to go. Well, I'm not going to do that. I'm not that person that's going to tell you what you want to hear. And then, all of a sudden you did something different. So I'm pretty proud of being but this goes back to my father. My father always told me, if you want to be a man, act like a man, look somebody in the eye and you tell them the truth. And that served me well in my life.
But that was extremely important, not just because the people had worked for their pensions, but in order to get the quality of teachers we want in this state, in order to get the quality of professionals working in state government, the pension is a key incentive. And I guess a lot of times there were actuarial assumptions that didn't prove accurate. And you had a massive cleanup job for them. I remember when you were raising the issue. Yeah. You never really got a lot of credit for it either. You did all the work, but saving the pension doesn't sound as sexy as other issues, even though state government could not function without a pension that had integrity and lived up to its promise. So you did a massive good deed in terms of state government, enabling future generations to join in state government and be able to say, I'm providing well for my future.
Yeah. Hey, Alan, it's like I said, I believe leaders have to lead. And when you get in those positions of leadership, there's tough calls that have to come with them. But, I asked for the job.
Us for the latest edition of Dynamic.
I wanted to be the Senate president.
Check back each week for
so once you get the job, you have to do the job. It's not that complicated.
Via YouTube and Spotify, and please
learn a lot in life. I didn't go to college, as you said earlier. My education was more of a street education.
You went to the school of hard knocks, is what you did.
And guess what? Both are valuable. Both are very valuable,
Sure is.
you know? But we did the tough things because we needed to do the things that people look, it's nice to have everyone like you and be happy with you, but if that's the case, you're not doing your job. Like I said, I'm running for governor. I don't want to be president, Alan. Every governor I dealt with, going all the way back to really Jim McGreevey, wanted to be president. You know what I mean? They all looked at it at that next step.
Well, certainly Chris Christie did.
Oh, hey, listen, Chris did the same thing. John Corzine was looking at it when he got here. You know, in order to fix New Jersey, you have to pay attention to New Jersey. You can't be looking at that next step. Otherwise, you're never going to fix what we need to fix. And I'm asking for the right to lead the state, which means do my job as governor and do the things I need to do to make New Jersey more affordable. And, the bad news is we spend way too much in this state on government. The good news is we have too much government and we can reduce it and save a whole lot of money. Like every school district should be a pre-K to 12. No more K to 2s and 4s and 6 and 8s. And we can start reducing the size of schools, not closing schools or where your kids are going to the school and Mrs. Jones will still be the fourth grade teacher. You're just going to have every school buying the same software, the same books. They're not going to have superintendents and administrations in every single one of those places. There's a lot of money to be saved, Alan, is all I can tell you. And I'm the guy that's not afraid to start pushing it. Gloucester County, where I was the freeholder director, I listened to the three mayors talk about their executive experience. And I told them, I said, well, being the freeholder director is being like the mayor of the county. And we did more shared services in Gloucester County than any county in the state till today. And we provide great service at lower cost. And that's what the public wants. We're the only county that has countywide ambulance. And our response times are one of the fastest in the states, if not the fastest. And we have half the ambulances running than we did before we merged it. So it's there if you just have the courage to step in the ring.
So I take it, I remember all your efforts. I first became aware of your efforts. It was interesting. When Christie became governor, you continued to push for the shared services. After a while, it seems that people were more willing to implement the things that you wanted. I take it if you became governor, that shared services would be a major priority of yours in terms of cost cutting.
Absolutely, because we have to bring the cost down. Alan, I'm the one that recommended a 2% property tax cap. It was me.
I remember.
If we had not done that, this year, we topped over $10,000 on property taxes. If we had not done that 2% cap, we would be at 15,000. So, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different outcomes, and Einstein said that's insanity. We need to change the way we do things, but the public has to be comfortable that the service they're going to get is as good as, if not better than. And I can point in so many directions to so many things that we've done. Gloucester County doesn't have any jails anymore. We closed all of our jails, our male, our female, our juvenile detention. They were spending $28 million a year on jails. We're now spending like 10, right? So think about the savings. We've passed $250 million in savings since we closed them all, because the last jail, I think, closed in 2013. So, like I said, it can be done. We didn't lay everyone off. We found jobs for people and we attritioned. So there's a way to do this to right-size government without hurting people, but not like what this Musk is doing, this animal's doing down in Washington, where you get an email one day that you're going to work and they lock you out That's real amazing way to treat human beings.
Unbelievable.
It's but you can shrink government without doing that stuff, without hurting people.
Well, you just established on our show a paradigm for how to get it done. And if you're elected governor, you'll have a chance to implement that. But I think it's incumbent that anyone who watches the show listen closely to you, because not only will they get the information, they'll get a prescription for how our various municipalities, our localities, and school districts can function more efficiently. And that's also a big part of the Steve Sweeney legacy. Steve, I've been delighted to have you on this show tonight. It was a learning experience for all of us. A final question. I don't want to ask this in a corny way. Campaigning is hard, okay? I take it that, from morning to night, you're traveling around, you're visiting different places. You have impressive people you're working with. You've always had good campaign staff and aides. You have a reputation for that. How do you think it's going? As a South Jersey person, there's a tendency to discount you, but I think Jim Florio put that in the mothballs years ago. So what's your sense of how it's going?
I actually think it's going good, Alan. It's a lot of work. I get up at 4:45 pretty much every morning because I got to go work out. After I work out, I get going, and we run till all day long. I'm getting out all throughout the state of New Jersey. Look, there's 6 candidates running. Pretty much like Jim Florio, it's a wide open field. We don't have the columns anymore. So without them, I have a very good opportunity to win this thing. Again, honestly, most of us do. I just think I'm the most experienced one that day one comes in here and does the job that the people actually say they want, which is make it more affordable, but I want my services. So I'm pretty happy with where we're at right now, Alan, to be honest with you.
I'm sure you have reason to be, and I think that you've made this a much more interesting campaign because of 2 things. Number one, your knowledge, your encyclopedic knowledge of state issues, but number 2 is you remind me of Harry Truman this way. You're very plain spoken. You lay it right out on the table, and it's made for a good campaign. We wish you all the best in your campaign. If you're elected, the state will be very well served. Continue to be an inspiration for the people in New Jersey, and I hope, if we're lucky, we'll get you to come back again.
I would love to, Alan. Thank you.
Thank you, and that concludes tonight's episode of the Voice of Dynamic Political Centrism. Tonight we had as our guest a person for the history books, Steve Sweeney, who is a major candidate in this gubernatorial campaign. That's it. We will be having a lot of shows in between now and the primary election. And we're also looking perhaps to have an election night show, which would be a lot of fun. And depending on how things go, we'll be able to interview the candidates and get their impressions that night. And it would be another pleasure to interview Steve Sweeney on the run. All the best to you, Steve, and all the best to your family. That concludes this episode. Everybody have a good night.
Thank you for joining us for the latest edition of Dynamic Political Centrism. Check back each week for our newest episodes, and you can catch past episodes online via YouTube and Spotify, and please subscribe to our Substack.